How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Gianluca and I'm a second year medical student studying in Canada. But today we're just going to cut straight to the chase. We're talking about the CASPer test, but more specifically, we're talking about some quick tips that you guys could take with you and hopefully help you just crush this thing. What's really awesome today is that I'm also joined by two fellow medical students, but not just fellow medical students, fellow medical student YouTubers. I have Thiago and Molly that are coming on today. We each go to a different Canadian medical school that does require the CASPer test, and in that way, I think this is going to be really helpful because I've been talking about the CASPer test myself for a while now, but sometimes having that difference in opinion between people, different tips from different places is really going to help out. And I mean, beyond that, collaboration is one of the things that is being assessed on the CASPer test, so at least our theme matches the topic. At the end of the video, we're also going to be talking about 2 tips for the CASPer Snapshot, which is brand new for 2020, so stick around to the very end if you're interested in that. Also, feel free to drop the video a like if you found it helpful, and if you have any questions or comments about any of the tips that we're given here today, or if you have any questions about how to prepare for the CASPer test, feel free to leave those in the comment section below because we are going to be answering all of those. So my very first tip when it comes to the CASPer test is called banking time, and I actually developed this tip when I was studying for the MCAT cars section, but it works just as well here. One of the most common questions that I get from students is just how much they should be writing for each of the 3 questions per section on their test. But I never really thought about it like that when I was writing the test. Instead, what I did was I knew that there was 5 minutes allowed to answer 3 questions. So the very first thing that I did when I got to a new section was read all 3 of the questions first, and then I divided that 5 minutes so that I was allowed to spend 2 minutes for that first question, 2 minutes for that second question, and then finally 1 minute for that third question. The whole idea is to write as much as you possibly can for that first question within that 2 minutes that you allowed yourself. But as soon as you go over 2 minutes, you have to stop writing right away and move on to the second question. But you don't necessarily need to use all 2 minutes. So let's say, for example, I was happy with my answer at the end of the first minute and 30 seconds that I had spent for question 1. What I would do then is take that remaining 30 seconds that I had allocated for myself and add it to my question bank. What that meant is that later on, if I needed a minute and a half, for example, to answer the third question, instead of the original 1 minute that I had given myself, I now had an additional 30 seconds in my bank that I could use to spend writing for that section there. A big part about being successful on the CASPer test is learning time management and learning how to move on from previous questions. So it's very important that no matter what amount of time you have set for yourself, and no matter how much time you have in your bank, as soon as that's out, you move on to the next question without thinking about the one that you were just working on anymore.
Hey guys, I hope you've been enjoying the video so far. So my tips, I have 2 of them for you. And the first one is try to start every answer to each scenario, the 12 scenarios, with a phrase that goes something like this: I don't want to make any assumptions without all the pieces of information. However, if this were to happen, and then lay out which road you want to take, right? There's always multiple options. If this were to happen, then I would do the result, what your final reaction is going to be, right? Because it shows that you understand your limitations and that you don't really want to make an assumption, but given this scenario that you really don't have too much to work with, you have to make an assumption. So as you lay out all the possibilities, they want to see you get to the kind of a conclusion, and you just want to state those. So what I do is I have a handout, and I'll show you that in a bit, and I have that written out on the top so that I know exactly what to write in every scenario. And the nice thing is, because there's multiple graders, nobody really sees the repetitiveness of it. My next tip is to grab a piece of paper and write down 4 things. So right here you can see the first one is going to be your role. The second is type of scenario. Third is those involved, and then the most pressing issue. And on the very top, I have that I don't want to make an assumption statement. And the really nice thing about this is that I had 12 sheets of these printed out so that every scenario that came up, I would write down what my role is. So I'm a friend, I'm a coworker, employer, because that anchors in your mind who you are and what perspective you should be viewing this scenario from. And when you go to answer the questions, you might forget your role, and you don't want to do that. So by writing it down, it leaves your head, goes onto the piece of paper. That's one less thing you have to worry about. And it helped me tremendously To be honest, I actually ended up not really doing the last three. It's kind of like if you have that extra time or your brain processes fast, then go for it.
My next tip is going to be about point form answers versus the whole sentence structured answers. And really, I don't think that it matters. When I wrote the CASPer test myself, I chose to answer all of my questions in full sentences versus point form. But I do have a lot of my friends that were really successful and did get into medical school just by answering all of the questions in point form. The tip here is that when you are practicing, make sure that you pick one method and then stick with it, even on test day. The last thing that you'd want to do is practice doing point form and then switch that up last second on the test day, because that's another variable that you add in terms of things that you're uncertain about. Whatever you're using to practice, whether that's point form or full sentences, I really don't think that it matters. I've seen both ways be successful. Pick one way and use it on the actual test as well.
Reflect on your personal experiences. So there are some CASPer questions that will require you to reflect on your life experience. And I think it's really important to spend some time reflecting on these life experiences before you write CASPer, so that when you do write it, you're not trying to remember the details of the experience, nor are you trying to remember an experience that is relevant to the question. My best advice is to go on the internet and just search up personal interview questions and start working through them. Eventually you'll find a theme, and it's fine that a lot of them are similar, so you'll be really well prepared for when you do the actual CASPer. For example, some questions that I prepared for include times that I've had a conflict, times that I've had to be a leader, or times that I've worked in a team.
And my last tip is going to be to always collaborate with other people no matter what. Don't forget that above all else, these situational judgment tests are used in the selection process for helping these institutions figure out which students are going to work well with others in either medicine, dentistry, nursing, veterinary school, but it is just a test of how you're going to interact and work with other people. Now, there are 12 different competencies the CASPer is going to be assessing for when you write the test. I will have those up on screen, but collaboration is just such an easy one to throw into every single one of your answers, score a few more points no matter the situation. So if you're given an example where you're an employee, let's say, you could always go ahead and collaborate with other employees. Ask them what they would do in the situation that you're in. You could also go ahead and talk to your manager or maybe just a supervisor and really consider some other viewpoints outside of your own. The most important thing here is that you're at least demonstrating that you're making an effort to consider every single possible viewpoint, or as many as you can, and that's going to be one of the most important things that you could do on the entire CASPer test. Now, the second part about this video is just to talk a little bit about CASPer Snapshot, which I said before, it's brand new for 2020, so none of us three have written or really done the CASPer Snapshot before, but thankfully Molly has actually done something very similar, so she's going to talk about that in a second. My biggest tip for CASPer Snapshot, after looking it up myself, is that I came across on the CASPer website that you don't need to do the snapshot on the same day that you write the regular CASPer test. So after seeing that, my biggest tip is to not do snapshot on the same day that you write CASPer. The reason being is because I remember when I wrote CASPer, I was pretty stressed out about it because it is such a big part of your application, depending on what school you're applying for. My sympathetic nervous system was through the roof, and if I have to go ahead and give an interview right after doing something like that, it would be like if I had to give an interview after writing the MCAT, for example. Definitely not something that I think would be really beneficial. So what I would say instead is to do your CASPer on one day, maybe give yourself a 1 to 2 day buffer, get ready for the snapshot part, and then do that on a separate day.
So here's some tips for the CASPer Snapshot. This is something that is new this year, but basically instead of typing your answer, you're gonna have 2 minutes to record yourself answering the question. I did not do the CASPer Snapshot, but I have done Cura Talent for a different program that I successfully applied for, and it's quite similar. So my biggest advice is to record yourself answering questions and get comfortable in front of the camera. I can find I can be kind of awkward in front of a camera and maybe intimidated when being filmed, so you really want to see where you're at when it comes to recording yourself. Record yourself, review the footage, and see if there's some areas you need to improve. Perhaps you talk too fast, or perhaps you're not as coherent as you think you are. I also would highly suggest, practice with the real test situation or conditions. If you have 2 minutes to answer the question, practice answering questions in 2 minutes. Find some questions online that you think might be relevant or they might ask you, and then film yourself, set a timer, and practice under that time limit so you can start learning how to gauge how long you've been talking for. The other thing I would highly suggest is to send that footage out to family and friends so you can get their advice and maybe some feedback from them. And hopefully, after a lot of practice, after some suggestions from friends and family, you'll be more comfortable in front of the camera and you're going to ace that snapshot.
So in wrapping up the video now, I just want to say a quick thank you to Tiago and Molly for actually coordinating this whole thing, but then also coming on the channel today. And hopefully it was able to help. I hope you guys learned something from these tips, and I really do hope that you guys kill this test. I remember I was so nervous going into it, but really I didn't need to be. Like, after I was done, I felt pretty good about it, and I hope it's the same with all of you guys as well. If you need to see more, there are going to be some other videos up on the other two channels that I'll have linked in the description, and I also made a complete guide to how to get ready for CASPer about a year ago, so I'll link that as well. Other than that, we'll see you guys all in the next one. Everyone, take care.